Chapter 481. Orissa could not help but go through all the possible scenarios in her head. She had no idea how the little guy would react later. Benjamin lifted his eyes to look at her. "What are you so nervous about?" "What?" Orissa turned around to look at him while fidgeting. Benjamin looked at her. "Watch a film if you're bored." Orissa pressed her lips and responded, "I am not in the mood." Benjamin looked at the bodyguard and signaled him to serve her a glass of fruit juice. "Miss York." "Thanks," Orissa responded. The bodyguard then went to get her more snacks. Snacking did help to kill time, but the journey still felt like an eternity. After peeping at the man who was still busy working, Orissa put on a pair of headphones and watched a film. Yet, she was so worked up that she did not know what she was watching. She had no choice but to force herself to continue watching the film since they would only arrive in another hour. Minutes later, her eyes felt heavy, and she eventually dozed off. Benjamin walked up to Orissa and grabbed a blanket to cover her body before continuing with his work. "Sweetheart," Orissa mumbled. Benjamin tilted his head to check on her and realized she was sleep-talking. The plane finally arrived at North Stream Airport around 10 o'clock in the late evening. Upon noticing Orissa was still asleep, Benjamin gestured for the bodyguards to keep quiet. After waiting for a short while, he decided to carry her since she was still sleeping like a log. They then got into the car that would take them to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, Benjamin woke Orissa up. Benjamin pinched her ruddy and plump cheek. "We're at the hospital now." Benjamin's eyes darkened, and he pinched her cheek again. "Wake up. We've arrived." Orissa finally woke up from her sleep. She looked into Benjamin's eyes and froze for a moment. Upon realizing she was still in a daze, he lifted his chin, gesturing for her to look out the window. Orissa turned around and saw the hospital. She was instantly overwhelmed by emotions. "We've arrived." She bounced up from his thighs right away. When she was about to get out of the car, she accidentally knocked her head against the headliner. "Ouch." Benjamin grabbed her arm and reprimanded her. "Stop acting like a headless chicken." Orissa rubbed her head and pouted. "Can you blame me? I'm just eager to meet my son." Benjamin pulled her over and gently massaged her head despite having a grim expression on his face. Orissa looked at him and said, "I'm fine now." Benjamin refused to let her go. "Apply some ointment first." He tilted his body to retrieve the first aid kit and took out a bottle of ointment to apply the medicine to her head. Orissa's heart started pounding after glancing at him a few times. She lost her composure when she realized she was sitting on his lap. When Orissa adjusted her body's position a little, Benjamin shot daggers at her and reprimanded her, "Don't move." Orissa froze for a moment and dared not move. She had no choice but to sit still on the man's lap. Upon feeling the muscles on Benjamin's thighs, her heart raced even faster. Even her cheeks also started blushing. After applying the ointment to her head, Benjamin noticed her brick-red face. A glint flashed across his eyes. Why does she look so attractive? Benjamin fixed his eyes on Orissa and held her gaze with a burning intensity. "Why are you blushing?" His magnetic voice rumbled through her ears. She felt a tingling sensation, and her cheeks got even rosier. "I feel a little warm." After avoiding his eye contact, she asked, "Can I get down now?" Benjamin grinned. "Yes." Yet, when she was about to get off the car, she felt the man was still wrapping his hands around her waist. She turned around to look him in the eye. Something in his gaze tugged at her heartstrings, making her heart flutter. Chapter 482. After feeling an intense warmth surge through her body, Orissa pushed him away and got down of the car. Benjamin looked at her and raised his brows. A corner of his lips quirked up when he saw how flustered the woman was. "She didn't even thank me for applying the ointment to her head." Then, Benjamin got out of the car too. After tidying up his clothes, he caught up with Orissa. When Orissa arrived at the elevator, she turned around to look at Benjamin. Benjamin tilted his chin, gesturing for her to enter the elevator. "Get in." Orissa pressed her lips and asked, "Which floor?" "Ninth." Benjamin reached out for her waist, but Orissa avoided him when she got in. After pressing the number, she kept looking at the screen atop the door as the elevator ascended. Earlier, Orissa managed to calm her nerves after Benjamin gave her an earful. But her anxiousness started creeping in again as she would be meeting her son soon. Benjamin was amused when he saw how nervous she was and how she swallowed the fluid lodged in her throat. Orissa turned around and shot daggers at him. "Why are you laughing?" Benjamin lifted his eyes and pinched her cheek. "Why are you so anxious? You're just meeting your son." Orissa opened her mouth but did not know how to respond to his words. Benjamin gave her a look and said gently, "You're going to frighten the kid with that look on your face. Just calm down and act normal. Do you remember how you approached Gavin when you first met him? Just do the same with this boy," Benjamin added. Orissa bit her lips. She wanted to stay as calm as possible but was stricken by remorse whenever she thought of how much she owed him. While Gavin grew up under Benjamin's care, this child had led a difficult life since he was born. It was a miracle that Donna did not torture him to death. Benjamin stroked her head. "We're here." Orissa took a deep breath and asked Benjamin to lead the way. "What are you waiting for? Let's go," she urged the man who refused to move. Yet, Benjamin stood still and tidied her hair. Orissa immediately walked up to the fire cabinet, looked at her reflection on the glass door, and tidied her clothes. Benjamin waited for her from a distance with his hands in his pockets. "Okay, I'm ready." Orissa turned around and noticed Benjamin was staring at her. She instantly looked away and said, "Please lead the way, Mr. Graham." Benjamin chuckled and walked along the corridor. As she was walking up to him, she looked around the place. "This hospital looks nice. I wonder if Madam Mary feels better now." Orissa was referring to Mary. Benjamin glanced at the woman, who started frowning again. "Stop overthinking. Sean will update us once he has completed the medical checkup." Upon noticing how calm and steady Benjamin was, Orissa mumbled, "Is he not worried at all?" Suddenly, the man turned back and grabbed her wrist. Orissa's eyes widened in shock. The man said, "Pull yourself together, and start behaving like an adult in front of the kids." Orissa could only stare at the man's broad shoulders as she did not know how she should respond to that. She kept mum and did not retaliate. Soon, the bodyguards noticed Benjamin and Orissa from a distance. Just when the bodyguards were about to greet them, Benjamin immediately stopped them. Orissa wanted to take a peep at Tim from the window but noticed her other children were in the ward as well. She turned around and glared at Benjamin in disbelief. "When did the kids arrive?" Benjamin glanced at her and answered, "Today." Orissa's mouth twitched upon hearing that. "Why didn't he tell me that the kids are here?" She got even more annoyed when she recalled the things she said to her children earlier. "He must have heard everything I said and laughed at me in secret." She gave Benjamin a murderous look. Benjamin cleared his throat and said, "Get in." Once again, Orissa was overwhelmed with anxiousness. Would the boy like me when he sees me? Upon noticing the way she fidgeted, Benjamin sighed. "Should I go in first?" Orissa grabbed his wrist and stopped him. "No, you can't go in before me." That remark rendered Benjamin speechless. Chapter 483. She glanced at the man. "You've already met him before. It's my turn now. I want to be the first to go in. Otherwise, the kid will think that I dislike him," she explained softly. Suddenly, the ward door was opened from the inside, and Orissa was startled. "Mommy! Mommy is really here." Jessie was ecstatic, and she threw herself into Orissa's arms. Orissa hugged Jessie and said, "Why didn't you tell me you're coming?" "Hee, we wanted to give you a surprise. Also, we wanted to see Tim quicker, so we came earlier," Jessie explained in a cute voice. Mommy, Gavin, Zachary, Oliver, and Jasper ran out one after another. Tim glanced at the door, turned back quickly, and lowered his head. Sean, Ethan, and Bradley went to the doctor's office while Tim accompanied Mary. Mary was eating. When she saw the sad little Tim, she patted his head. "You can go out if you want to." Tim shook his head and said, "I want to be with Grandma." Orissa couldn't care to talk with all of the children, so she only patted their heads. However, she realized Tim hadn't come out yet, so she hurried inside. She suddenly remembered that she had bought some clothes for Tim and quickly turned around to ask Benjamin, "Where's the present?" Benjamin looked at her blankly and said, "The bodyguard will bring it here soon." Orissa nodded and went in. As she entered, she saw Tim feeding Mary while sitting by the hospital bed. Orissa looked at Tim's frail and tanned physique. Her heart ached, and her eyes began tearing up. Fearing that she might scare the child, she was hesitant to approach them. "Tim," Orissa called out to Tim out of anticipation. However, she lost control of her voice and quivered. Her eyes were red as she got emotional. She couldn't bear to look away from the child. Child, my sweetheart," Orissa sniffled. Tim lowered his head. He ignored her and avoided eye contact with her. After a while, Orissa was at a loss when she noticed Tim ignoring her. "Tim, why won't you answer her?" After witnessing the scene, Mary asked in a heavy tone. Tim didn't respond. Instead, he bit the corner of his mouth. "It's okay." Orissa smiled and walked to the hospital bed. "Madam Mary, are you feeling better?" Mary nodded and looked at Orissa. She was beautiful and gentle and looked like a loving mother who cared for her children. "Yes, a little, Madam Mary. Don't worry. The treatment will help you recover." Orissa pulled a chair to the side of the hospital bed and sat down. "Why are you eating so late?" "I just woke up." Mary smiled. Her eyes were glued on Orissa. Although it was her first time meeting her, Mary could tell that Orissa was a kind woman. Orissa nodded in acknowledgement and began to explain. "Something came up during the day. Otherwise, I would have come here in the morning. I heard from Benjamin that you have vomited blood. I'm fine now. They got me a doctor." As Mary spoke, she glanced at Benjamin, who just happened to walk in. Benjamin was holding a bag with children's clothes and some health supplements. "Madam Mary, take a bottle of these after you eat. It's to nourish your body." Benjamin had someone buy the most luxurious health supplements. They were all ready-to-drink products and could be consumed after heating up. "You can warm it up with hot water whenever you want to have it," Benjamin advised while he put down the items. Orissa looked at Benjamin and instructed, "Put them aside for now. I'll give it to Madam Mary later." Benjamin nodded. Mary was touched by their generosity. "You don't have to buy these for me. My condition will still be the same even after all the nourishments." "Madam Mary, it will make a difference. You still have to stay in the hospital for a while. You need some nourishment to keep your body strong," Orissa persuaded Mary, fearing that she would reject them. At the same time, she gestured for Benjamin to put the health supplements aside. Chapter 484. When Mary saw they didn't discriminate a poor old lady like her and were ever so passionate with her, she started to tear up. "Tim, hand me the bowl. I'll feed her. You go and play with Gavin and the others, okay?" Orissa walked to Tim, squatted down, and gently suggested. "There's no need for that." Tim pouted and rejected her. Then, he turned around and continued to feed Mary. Orissa felt dejected for a moment when she felt Tim's rejection and unhappiness toward her. Mary looked at them and sighed softly before taking a bite of the food fed by Tim. Then, she said to Orissa, "Don't worry. It takes some time." Orissa was startled. She looked at Mary in astonishment. "Did she know already?" Mary smiled and nodded. "The young man told me about it." Orissa wasn't sure which young man Mary was talking about, but Benjamin knew that she was referring to Ethan. "It looks like Ethan has already told her." "Madam Mary, you knew." Orissa was straightforward and concerned about Tim's feelings. Mary nodded. "When I woke up, I wanted to talk to Tim about it. I didn't expect you to come over so soon. I heard they said you were sick. Are you okay now?" Mary was concerned about Orissa's poor health. Tim also sneaked a peek at her. Seeing that Mary was a kind-hearted person, Orissa was deeply moved. After looking at the interaction between Mary and her child, she knew they had a good relationship. She smiled and said, "It's just something minor. Don't listen to them. I've already recovered." Orissa didn't want Mary to worry about her. She was still hospitalized after all. "That's great." Mary nodded. "How should I address you?" "My name is Orissa, but you can call me Issa. The father is Benjamin." Orissa introduced Benjamin and herself to Mary. Benjamin glanced at her before looking at Tim. Then, he sighed in his heart. Gavin and the others came in and didn't want to disturb Tim and the others. So they stood aside. Orissa had a chat with Mary before switching her focus on Tim. She kept looking at Tim, trying to imprint every detail of his looks in her mind. Tim felt her gaze, but he didn't show any repulsion. However, his body was all tense. He was getting nervous. Maybe it was because he knew Orissa was his mother and was too timid to approach her, afraid that she might dislike him. Orissa couldn't help but want to hug him. As she reached out her hand and touched Tim's hair, she saw the repulsion in his eyes and decided not to hug him. "Sweetheart, how are you doing?" Orissa smiled and looked at her son. Tim pouted and blushed. He was embarrassed to hear Orissa calling him her sweetheart. "Tim," Mary raised her voice and reminded Tim, "be polite." After a while, he replied softly, "I am fine." Orissa narrowed her eyes and gave him a loving smile. "That's great." Tim shuddered and glanced back at her. Then, he turned around and continued to feed Mary. Benjamin was delighted to see their interaction. "I used to call Tim by another name. However, when he was a child, the children in the village called him Tim," Mary explained to them. She seemed to like Tim's name a lot. "What a coincidence. I bought a house in Rudisii village. I even went there a while ago," Orissa said. Mary was surprised. "You've been to Rudisii village?" Orissa nodded. "Yes, I took the children there a while ago. But we only stayed for a couple of days." Tim seemed to recall something and quickly glanced at Orissa again. "Are they the ones who played in the stream?" Chapter 485. Orissa didn't notice how Tim looked at her as she was busy talking to Mary. "Mary, we have all been to Rudisii village." Zachary interjected their conversation in a serious tone. Mary smiled and said, "That's quite a coincidence. Where is the house?" Mary was surprised when Orissa told her the location of the house. "So that's the one. I remember that it was unoccupied after the Rogers family moved out. However, someone would go there to clean it every now and then." The villagers only knew that the house was bought by someone who wasn't from the village, and they didn't see anyone living there. Orissa smiled when Mary remembered the house. "I have always been overseas and nearly forgot about the house. I only brought the children there for a visit after remembering it." Benjamin snorted in his heart as Orissa lied blatantly. However, he didn't expose her lies because Mary and Tim were present. He didn't want to spoil the happy chatter that Orissa and Mary were having. So he sat by the coffee table and signaled the 5 children to come. Gavin looked back at Benjamin and went over to sit with him. Then, the 4 younger siblings also came over to sit with him. Suddenly, the 5 children began to look at each other. Orissa was with Mary and Tim, and she took no notice of Benjamin and the children. "Tim, I'll feed Mary. Go have a break," Orissa said gently to Tim. However, Tim shook his head. Mary realized Orissa was a little discouraged, but she knew they couldn't rush things. Tim was still a little sensitive after all. She could tell that Tim knew something that they didn't. Gavin and the others had already made their identities clear when they introduced themselves to Tim. "You guys should have some rest. Unfortunately, I'm not able to prepare any refreshments for you. Tim, give them a glass of water." Mary apologized to Orissa for not being able to welcome them properly due to her poor health. Hence, she instructed Tim. Then, she grabbed the bowl from Tim and urged him, "Go on." Tim walked to the water dispenser and filled a glass of water for Orissa. "I think I should address her as Miss York. Miss York, have some water." "Miss York." Orissa was a little disappointed, but she happily received the glass of water from Tim and reached out to pat his head. "Thank you." Gavin addressed her as Miss York back then, so she decided to get along with Tim as Miss York for now. Tim went to fill another glass of water and gave it to Benjamin. "Mr. Graham, have some water." Tim was more familiar with Benjamin. However, compared to Orissa, Benjamin's domineering presence stopped most people from approaching him. "Okay." Benjamin glanced at Tim before taking the glass of water. Before Tim could turn around to fill another glass of water, Benjamin stopped him and pointed at the 5 other children. "Did they say anything to you?" Tim stared at him, not understanding the question. Gavin didn't like Benjamin's behavior. "You're frightening, Tim." Benjamin shot his glaring eyes at Gavin and said, "Be quiet." Gavin pouted. "It's okay," Tim whispered to Gavin. Benjamin raised his brows, looked back and forth between Tim and Gavin, and thought it was a wise decision to bring them here. Tim didn't seem to distance himself from them. Benjamin carried Tim from the ground and sat him on his lap. Then, he spoke gently, "Tell me, did they bully you?" "We won't bully him. What if Tim doesn't come home with us?" The 5 children murmured. Benjamin looked down at Tim, who found himself in an uncomfortable situation. Chapter 486. While Tim was getting water for Benjamin, Orissa took over and fed Mary. When she heard Benjamin talking to the child, her eyes widened. Since when did he tell the child about his identity? He should have told me, so I won't have to tiptoe around. If that's the case, the boy must know who we are then. Orissa glanced at them and saw Tim sitting rigidly on Benjamin's lap. Even Tim's small face looked really tense. She reminded Benjamin, "Benjamin, don't scare Tim." Benjamin looked up and glanced at her before returning his attention to the boy. That was when he released his hands and said, "If they bully you, you have to tell me." "They never," responded Tim softly. Feeling that he was acknowledging Benjamin, the boy pursed his lips, jumped off from Benjamin's lap, and even smoothed his clothes. Benjamin's heart skipped a beat. This boy is very endearing. Gavin, Zachary, Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse saw that Tim seemed a little scared of their daddy. "Tim, come over here and take a seat. Let's have some fruit." Zachary was very welcoming to Tim. However, Tim shook his head and ran over to Mary. When he saw that Orissa was feeding Mary, he tugged at her clothes before saying, "Miss York, I'll feed Grandma. You go and sit over there." Orissa turned to look at her son lovingly and said, "It's fine. I will do it. Go play with Gavin and the rest of them." Tim remained by the bedside and watched as Orissa fed Mary. When Orissa saw Tim standing next to her, she pulled him over and said, "Help me blow at the soup and cool it down." Tim just cast a glance at her and used the spoon to stir the soup to cool it down. When Orissa saw that, she was thrilled. She was not expecting him to accept her so soon. She could wait. "Madam Mary, take your time and eat slowly." Orissa was very patient and fed Mary as if she was feeding a child. Once in a while, she would clean Mary's mouth and even coax her. Mary was very touched. "Isa, there's no need to feed me. I can eat by myself. It's all right. Anyway, I have nothing to do. I slept on the way here, so I'm not tired at all," said Orissa with a smile. She continued to feed her. Seeing that she was so determined, Mary did not refuse her kindness anymore. Once Mary was done with her meal, Orissa fed her with some soup. Worried that it might be too hot for her, Orissa cooled it down by blowing on it before giving it to Mary. "Be careful, okay?" Mary looked at her adoringly. "This girl is genuinely good to me. She isn't putting up a front." Mary was very happy for Tim. "It looks like I don't have to worry about Tim if he lives with Isa." Before Mary could finish her soup, Sean and the others arrived. They were very glad to see Benjamin and Orissa there. "Orissa, Benjamin, both of you are here." Sean looked at them with a smile on his face. "Yes," Orissa replied, "we have been here for a while now." Benjamin glanced at them and asked Sean, "Have you taken a look at Mary yet?" "When I got here, Mary was still asleep, and I checked her after she woke up. Her condition is still quite stable, but a full body checkup is needed. After she has finished taking her meal and rested for a while, we can perform some parts of the checkup first," said Sean. After all, there were several things to be done for the full body checkup, and it would be too tiring for Mary to finish everything in one day. Sean planned to do some parts of the checkup for Mary later that night. Benjamin gestured to Sean for a word outside, so Sean went out with him. After greeting Orissa and playing with Tim, Bradley went over to sit with Gavin. Ethan greeted Orissa before going out with Benjamin. When Gavin and his 4 siblings saw that there was nothing to do in the ward, they followed suit to eavesdrop. Chapter 487. When Tim saw that, he bit his lips. He was tempted to hear about his grandma's health condition too. Orissa rubbed his head and assured him, "Don't worry." Tim looked up at her before looking down. Looking at his quiet face, Orissa smiled gently. After feeding Mary some fruit, Orissa proceeded to clean up the small dining table and was about to clear the trash. Tim snatched the trash from her and ran out. Orissa was taken aback. "Let him do it." Mary laughed. Orissa smiled and said, that was very fast of him. With a sigh, Mary explained, our family has always been very poor. Hence, he has been used to doing chores at a young age. It's a pity we have never been able to provide a comfortable life for him. When Arissa heard what Mary said, she consoled her. Grandma, please don't say that. We are very grateful to you. If not for all of you, we may never see this son of ours again. Pain showed up on Arissa's face. Tim had nearly lost his life when Donna took him away. There was no way she could forget that pain and sorrow. Mary looked at her. Isa, that young man, Ethan, told me that Tim had been taken away back then. Is that true? Arissa nodded and sniffled. It's true. Back then, I was being locked in a place. Without withholding anything back, Arissa went on to share with Mary everything that had happened to her back then. Mary sighed after hearing her story. You have had such a hard life. How can there be such a vile and wicked woman in this world? Isa, if Tim knows about this, he won't blame you too. He hasn't seen you for so many years. Perhaps, that's why he isn't used to you yet. Give him some time, and he will be fine. Arissa nodded with a smile. I'm very thankful that we have found him. The rest of it can wait. Mary agreed with her too. I'm only an old and sick woman. Not only can I not look after him well, but I will also be a burden to him. He is the one who dragged me here to see the doctor. The money used is also earned by him. Arissa's heart ached when she heard that. She felt sorry for her son and also for Mary as well. Madam Mary, don't worry. Just get well and don't worry about the medical fees. I will handle everything. How can I let you do that? Mary was embarrassed by the offer. Grandma, please accept our token of appreciation. You have taken very good care of Tim. Footing your medical bills will make us feel better. No matter what, you are still Tim's grandma. Therefore, you are our relative too. It's only right that we take care of you. Please don't feel bad about it. I don't even know how to thank you. Arissa tried very hard to convince Mary because she wanted her to get well without any worries. Once you are well again, I still require your help to look after the children. Mary was perplexed. Arissa explained, both Benjamin and I have to work during the day. We have no time to look after the children. If you are around to keep an eye on them, we will feel a lot at ease. Tim will also feel much better with you by his side. Don't you think so? Mary was aware of her kind intention, so she nodded with contentment. All right then, I understand. I will do my best to get well. Arissa poured Mary a glass of water and only gave it to her when it cooled down a little. Madam Mary, take some water to soothe your throat and take a rest. After that, you still have to go for a checkup. Of course. Mary said, please go and check on Tim. Is he still outside? Arissa tucked Mary in before heading outside. There was no sight of the men and the children anywhere. Where have they gone to? Where did they go? She asked the bodyguards at the door. Miss York, the children have followed Mr. Graham to the doctor's office. She instructed the bodyguards to keep an eye on Mary before heading in the direction they were pointing at. From a distance away, she could see Tim hiding outside the door. Chapter 488. Arissa cleared her throat. Tim jumped. When she caught him eavesdropping, he blushed and ran back toward the ward. Sweetheart, where are you going? When Arissa saw Tim's reaction, she realized she should not have caught him off guard. Tim shot her a look and answered, I'm going to Grandma. After a pause, Tim continued, my name is Tim, not Sweetheart. Arissa smiled and walked up to grab his hand. You are a sweetheart. My sweetheart. Arissa's heart sank the moment she touched Tim's hand. His wrists were particularly smaller than her other 5 children. They were down to the bones. In fact, they were as thin as matchsticks. Tears started welling up in her eyes, and she turned away. I know your name is Tim. But, I like to call you Sweetheart. Let's go over to Grandma. Tim noticed that Arissa sounded different and sneaked a peek at her. He saw her wiping her tears away, and he pursed his lips. It was only after a while before Tim asked, Miss York, what's wrong with you? Arissa was stunned. She did not expect him to be so observant. Sniffling her nose, she calmed herself down, got down on her knees, and placed both her hands on Tim's shoulders. I'm fine. I recalled something and felt upset. That's all. Tim eyed her carefully as if he was making sure that she was all right. Orissa smiled very gently at him and caressed his face. Really, I'm fine. I'm very happy to see you. She wanted so much to hug him, but she was afraid that she might freak him out. Tim pursed his lips before running toward Mary's ward. Orissa was startled. Did I scare him again? Tim ran to the door, stopped, and turned around to look at her. All of a sudden, Orissa felt very happy. It was very likely that he was not used to her yet. She walked over and said, "Let's go in." Tim went in. Grandma. When Mary saw her, she invited her to sit down. Orissa went and got the presents that she had prepared before coming. Tim, I don't know what you like, so I bought you some clothes. Orissa walked toward the boy and placed the clothes against him. She noticed that they were still too big for him. She had already chosen one size smaller, but she did not expect him to be even skinnier than she thought. They're a little too big, but it's okay. A little alteration and they will be fine. She looked at Tim and continued, Daddy is the one who bought you the other set. Even though Benjamin did not pay for the clothes, Orissa still wanted Tim to feel his love. Tim had his hands clutched tightly around the clothes. It was as if he could not decide whether to accept the gifts or not. Mary knew that the boy was shy. Tim, accept the gifts. It's very sweet of Miss York to get them for you. Tim took the clothes and said, Thank you, Miss York. Orissa smiled and rubbed his head. You're welcome. Do you want to try them out? Tim glanced at her bashfully and allowed Orissa to put the clothes on him. Seeing that he did not reject her, Orissa was extremely happy. Yes, they're a little too big. They will need alterations. Orissa adjusted the clothes and looked all around. Grandma, are they too big? Orissa asked Mary. The elderly lady nodded. They do look bigger, but it's still fine for him to wear them. There's no need for any alterations to be done. It's too much of trouble. It's no trouble really. I'll just get someone to do the alterations. Orissa removed the clothes from Tim and handed him the pants. Sweetheart, give these a try and see if they fit. The pants had an elastic waistband, so they did fit quite well indeed. The pants fit quite nicely. We only have to alter the shirts. Once I have them resized, I'll give them to you. Is that okay? Said Orissa to Tim. Tim nodded. Thank you, Miss York. Chapter 489. Orissa fondled his head, folded the clothes, and put them aside. We bought you shoes too. Sit down and let me put on the shoes for you. She took out the shoes and left them on the side. Tim removed his slippers and curled his toes. Orissa knew that her son was embarrassed, so she pulled him down to the seat and put on the shoes for him. Tim pulled back his legs and put them on by himself. Orissa looked at him and just let him be. Did they fit you? Yes, responded Tim. She pressed her fingers on the front of the shoes and realized they were a little too big. Orissa looked at Tim and noticed that he was blushing. They are too big. Rubbing his head, Orissa said softly, Don't worry. I'll get you another pair. Tim mumbled, It's fine. I can wear these too. No, shoes have to fit well in order to be comfortable. Orissa brushed his hair. Seeing that he did not remove the shoes, she was delighted. It appeared that Tim did like his presents after all. Remove the new shoes first. We'll go get you a pair that fits well. As for this pair of shoes, you can wear them once your feet have grown bigger. Tim looked at the smile on her face and pondered. Is she genuinely nice to me, or is she doing this out of guilt? The thought of Orissa doing all those to make it up to him turned Tim aloof once again. Miss York, please don't waste your money. I don't like the shoes. Hearing the cold voice of the boy, Orissa felt her heart ache. He was resisting her attempt to get closer to him. All right then, sweetheart, what kind of shoes do you like? Tell me, and I'll buy them for you. Tim turned away. Orissa felt so helpless, and when she saw the boy's frail body, tears started to well up again. Her heart hurt so much. Isa, don't worry. If Tim prefers the new shoes, just let him wear them. When Mary saw that she was upset, she tried to console her. Orissa nodded. Just then, Benjamin and the rest of them came in. Madam Mary, how are you feeling now? I'm feel fine, replied Mary with a smile. Please follow Sean for your checkup. The rest will be completed tomorrow, said Benjamin. Mary acknowledged. Sean and the medical team took Mary for her checkup. Tim followed behind them too. Tim, why don't you wait for your grandma in the room? I want to go with grandma. Tim held on very tightly to Mary's hands and bit his lips. He was worried that Mary would desert him. Mary was heartbroken. So was Orissa. She went up to touch his head and said, "Let him go with them." "We will go too," Mary said. "It's only a checkup. There's no need for all of you to follow me. It's getting late. All of you should go back and get some rest. Let's go and get the checkup done first." Orissa did not want to get into an argument with Mary. She intended to stay back and take care of them. "Let's go, Madam Mary," Sean called out as he pushed her away. Everything had already been arranged. Orissa wanted to hold Tim's hand, but he ran and held Mary's hand instead. Looking at Tim's back, she reminded herself to take things slowly. "Let's go." Benjamin went up to her and held her outstretched hand. "Don't fret," Benjamin comforted her. "Sure." Orissa looked at him and asked, "What were all of you discussing earlier on?" "The treatment course for Mary. We will do whatever that can be done here. For the rest of it, we may have to return to Delmore and get them done there." Orissa found that it was a good plan. She glanced at the direction of Tim before saying, "I'm worried he may not want to follow us to Delmore. After all, it must be difficult for Mary to leave her hometown, let alone a child. They would definitely find it hard to adjust to the new environment." "Don't worry, I have an idea. For the time being, let them stay here first. We can only transfer Mary to another hospital when her condition has stabilized anyway." Benjamin analyzed the situation for her, and Orissa agreed. Chapter 490. Gavin, Zachary, Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse were walking behind them along with Ethan and Bradley. Zachary let out a sigh. "Just now, Mommy was upset." Oliver chimed in, "Should we explain everything to Tim?" Gavin looked at them and said, "I don't think we should. At least, not now. Let's wait until Madam Mary gets better before we say anything." They were equally upset when they saw their mommy getting distressed. However, they could not bear to see Tim feeling terrible either, so they decided not to push Tim too much. Jasper said, "We can discuss with Mommy and see when it will be a good time to tell Tim the truth." The 5 children were thinking the same thing. Not only does Tim not allow Mommy to hold his hands, but he doesn't hold ours too. "Tim doesn't only do it to Mommy," claimed the observant Jessie. Her 4 brothers nodded and agreed with her. Bradley and Ethan found their discussion amusing. Bradley told them, "It's easier for all of you children to mingle around. Try to talk to Tim more often. Once he is comfortable with all of you, that's when you can tell him the truth. That way, Tim will feel better too." Ethan echoed, "That's a good idea. Don't be as straightforward as your daddy." The 5 children turned and looked at Ethan. Ethan burst out laughing and told them how Benjamin talked to Tim that morning. The mouths of the 5 children twitched. Daddy must have scared Tim. Finally, all of them caught up and kept Mary accompanied while she had her checkup done. Even her own son could not be bothered to be there. Yet, she had only known those people for less than a day, and they were more concerned about her health than her own flesh and blood. When Mary went in to get her CT scan done, Tim was not allowed to follow her, so Orissa and the children stayed with him. "Don't worry," Orissa comforted Tim as she kept her eyes on him. "Tim, Madam Mary will be out very soon." Gavin explained, "When I was young, I did this before too." Tim blinked before looking at him. Orissa caressed Gavin's head too. "It's my fault for not looking after all of you well." Gavin hugged his mommy and said, "Mommy, my ill health has nothing to do with you. Don't blame yourself." Orissa sniffled and felt very sorry for them. "Mommy, don't get emotional. Calm down. Be the strong woman that we know you are." When Zachary saw that she was about to break down, he quickly calmed her down because he was worried that she might faint again. Orissa did not know how to react to that. Sure, she took a look at Tim and noticed him evading her eyes. She felt better. "Don't worry, there are so many doctors attending to Grandma. She will be fine." Tim kept a close watch on the door. He was biting his lower lip, and there was a worried look on his tiny face. The helplessness on his face was heartbreaking. "Tim, We will be with you. Mommy and Mr. Graham will definitely find the best doctors to treat Madam Mary. Don't be sad. Jessie held onto Tim's hand and felt that his hand was much smaller than all her other brothers. Her eyes teared up immediately. When Tim saw that Jessie was about to cry, he whispered, "I'm fine." Seeing that Tim seemed to have accepted Jessie, Orissa was relieved. She then signaled to the rest of her children. They caught on and went up to Tim. Jasper said, "Tim, Madam Mary will surely be all right. Don't think too much. Mommy always likes to think too much. That's why her health isn't so good." Orissa wondered. What kind of comparison is that? Oliver asked, "Tim, other than Madam Mary, is there anyone else in your family?" Tim blinked his eyes. He did not want to mention Raphael, but he was Mary's son after all. There was nothing he could do about it. "I still have an uncle. He is Grandma's son." When Orissa heard about that person again, she asked Tim out of curiosity, "Sweetheart, where is your uncle now?"